Our mission is to communicate well, to negotiate and find the best win-win situation for our buyer, and to win that client for life and possibly a great friend. So the first thing we're going to do when we meet with a buyer, we're going to find out what they need before we even dive into the buyer's representation. And a lot of times what we're going to do is we're going to share with them the information about brokerage services. And this is a form that we have to give every buyer. It's the state of Texas. Anybody who's considering looking. It's actually an attachment in our email. It's on our Facebook. It's on our website. You can find it everywhere. And what I love about this form is that the state of Texas really does a good job on this information of brokerage services, also known as an IABS. And it talks about like, what are our duties at the bare minimum, right? We put our buyers above needs above our own. Okay. We're going to inform them of material information. Now, are we going to visit with the buyer about things that are outside of our expertise? Like we don't give tax advice. We don't give accounting advice. We can't do a lot of things that are outside of our scope. But our goal is to share with them what we can find out and make sure that it's material facts. We're going to answer questions. One of the great things that we have is that we can connect our buyers with our community. We have thousands of agents that we have access to, and sometimes they need vendors. We can give them access to our vendors. And of course, this is something that we're finding in this market. Sometimes we'll get a client that might not want to be honest or fair, right? And this already outlines how we need to be honest and fair. It is outside of our scope and our minimum requirements by law. So if a buyer wants us to be dishonest, legally, we're not allowed to be dishonest in our negotiations. Make sense? If you haven't gotten to that place yet, it'll come. This says, as an agent, if we're hired by the owner, we work for the owner. If the buyer hires us, we work for the buyer. So this is a good opportunity for us to like share with our buyers that says, hey, if for some reason there's a house out there that you want and you go to that listing agent by law is required to represent the seller wholeheartedly and not you. They'll be fair and honest, but they're looking out for the best interest of that seller. And then I love explaining what an intermediary is. An intermediary is where two agents are working for the same brokerage. So at EXP, we have thousands and thousands of EXP agents here in Texas, all working under the same brokerage and the same managing broker, Karen Richards. So if that should come to be the case, there's an extra form that we'll provide to the client, both the buyers and the sellers, that says, hey, both agents are working with EXP. We cannot disclose if the seller will take less or if the buyer will pay more. Okay? So just know that there's that good faith thing. Sub-agent, we don't really do this in North Texas as much, so that doesn't apply to us here in North Texas. And it also says all agreements between you and the broker should be in writing and clearly established. I love this because this sets precedent and gets us to the buyer's rep agreement. So the information of brokerage services, it fully outlines the relationship with the buyer and the agent, the seller and the agent, should they represent both, and it lets the client know that that agreement needs to be in writing. So we have them sign this, and basically this just acknowledges that the client has seen this. So that's our information of broker services. Buyer's rep agreement. So the buyer's rep agreement is the agreement that allows the client to hire us so that we can represent them. They tell us is held confidential. In this agreement, it says that we're going to be loyal and obedient as long as it's legal. Our job is to obey. Disclosure of material facts, accountability, reasonable skills, and care. So these are the things that we're going to for sure do. So this is an example of a buyer's rep agreement. So let's kind of go over it really quick. It's going to have our client's name, our information, And it defines acquire, which means to purchase or lease, closing. And when we talk about closing, there's a difference between closing and funding. Closing is when you go to sign the paperwork. Funding is when the bank has released the money and it has funded, and the title company has the funds to release to pay off the lender and the title and the seller. Okay. The market area, I generally just do North Texas because that's an area that I serve. If for some reason our clients are looking in other areas, of course, we have access to tens of thousands of agents. In fact, almost 90,000 agents. So we can pretty much help a client anywhere. And then the property is going to be the real estate that they're looking, and it can be new construction, land for sale by owners, anything like that. And we're going to make sure that we dive deep into all the places that you can find land and how we as an agent can help. The term, depending on the market and depending on our buyer's needs, that can be a term of 6 months to 12 months. Broker's obligation, my obligation as an agent is to help the client acquire a property or purchase a property in our market area. What we ask in return is that our client and our buyer works exclusively with us. Great reasons you want to work exclusively with one agent is that in that process, what we have found is that that agent really gets to know the buyers. There's a whole series of questions, a whole series of going to looking at houses and learning what a buyer really wants. Before I've had a buyer go in and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to have a house with a pool. The only reason I want to move is because this house, I need it to have a pool and I need to have a downstairs bedroom, right? And they go and they look at a property and they found this amazing house, but it doesn't have a pool. And we can say, hey, you mentioned at the beginning that you really need a pool. Did something's change, right? And then they're like, oh, no, I really do need this pool. I really wish this house had a pool. And then we can talk about, okay, could we put in a pool? Is it financially feasible to put in a pool? Is it worth it? And it saves a buyer that time of spinning when we have all that unemotional data that we can bring back. And that happens a lot. And also, you don't want as a buyer to go directly to the seller's listing agent and expect that seller's listing agent to look out for you, because that seller has signed a listing agreement with that agent. And that agent has agreed to be obligated to that seller, not the buyer. So representations, this basically means that you are who you are, and you can sign on your own behalf. Intermediary, we talked about this in the information of brokerage services. That means that both parties, seller and buyer, are being represented by the same brokerage. In this case, we'll work it out and you'll get another form notifying you. Just know that if I'm representing you as a buyer, and I also note that the seller is taking less or has some situations that they don't want disclosed, I cannot disclose to the buyer. We have to treat it like it's separate. You have the option of not looking at listings that are being sold by eXp, but we never recommend that. Competing clients, that basically just means that I have other clients. We have other buyers as well that we work with. Confidential information. Remember, the seller has this, you have this. If I know that you will pay more and you don't want me to let the seller know that you will pay more, I'm not going to go tell the seller that you're willing to pay more. Broker's fee, we as Homestar sellers, we ask all of our buyers to pay 3%. We'll make every effort to get that from the MLS. So if you're on Netris, and we'll go through our MLS, it actually shows on there the buyer's agent's commission. If for some reason they don't pay 3%, we will for sure let you know. And builders are right now are offering bonuses. Well, they actually can pay more than that as well. So 3% is what we have historically have received on a close, and we get that from the cooperating brokerage. So just know that in 5, 6, 10 years down the road, when after we've helped you as a buyer purchase the home, and 5, 6, 10 years down the road you decide to sell and you come back to us, we're going to do a listing agreement. And in that listing agreement, it's going to say, hey, Mr. Seller, you agreed to pay our brokerage a set amount, let's say 6%. 3% will pay the listing agent, and 3% of that will go towards the buyer's agent. So right now, you might not be paying for me, but just know in 6, 5, 10 years, you're going to pay 6% towards the listing, half of which we'll give to the buyer's agent as the cooperating agent for bringing the buyer. And source of commission, we only earned and payable. We only get paid once you purchase the property, you close, and you fund. Okay. If we go through all this work, we've shown you 100 houses, something happens, heaven forbid, you lose your job, you can no longer purchase the house. You don't owe us any money. Okay. We just ask that down the road, you come back to us and let us help you. Or meanwhile, if your friend or coworker or family member is looking to buy or sell sometime, that you refer them to us. 3-way text introduction is the best way. Additional compensation. Sometimes we do get additional compensations. We'll notify you. There's a separate form. As you can tell, the state of Texas has provided all these promulgated forms for us to use to fill out, to disclose to you for everything. Okay. This talks about acquiring our brokers' listings, construction, service providers, and things like that. Protection period. So the protection period is like that period of time. Let's say we agree to work together for 6 months, but during the 6 months, we submitted an offer. Okay. And then after our agreement ends, the seller accepts our offer. It means that we still get to work together and we'll still get paid for it. And the listing agent will still pay us, and we'll still agree to represent you for at least 30 days after this protection period, only on the properties that we have already showed you and we've already started the process rolling. If for something happens after the 6 or 12 months, whatever we've agreed on in this buyer's rep agreement, you choose to, you go find another property and we didn't actually start that process with you, then you're on your own. Okay. Escrow authorization. Here in North Texas, we don't actually escrow, but the title company will hold your escrows. And we'll dive deeper into that later on and what escrows mean. We get paid in Dallas County. Mediation. If something happens, we'll mediate. And then we get your typical contract language that we're going to see in all the other stuff. Okay. An addenda to this that's always checked, and I don't have the option to uncheck, is information about brokerage services, because state of Texas requires us to make sure that we have given that to you. So we'll make sure that our buyers acknowledge and check that off, that it's been given. Then we have all the special provisions and it's outlined there. And then we just get everybody's signature. What this form does, it allows us as agents to be hired and work for the buyer. So we're really super excited about that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Services to our buyers. These are all the services. They're all outlined in the buyer's rep agreement, but also a lot of this is stuff that we do above and beyond. Okay. And we're going to go over the bulk of this in this buyer's presentation right now. It's a lot, but it's going to be easy. All right. We talked about how we get compensated already. That's already designed in the buyer's rep agreement. So now let's go into lenders. So I don't know if you know, but the main reason out of your option period, we're going to talk about option period in a little bit, but the first thing we need to do, and we're going to help our buyers do, is connect them with a lender that is best for them. Not all lenders are the same. Not all lenders have the same program. Right now, we're working with the buyer who's working with a hard money lender because he can't work with a traditional lender. And with the rates they are, it just makes sense for him. But some questions that if you're going to go out on your own and you're going to shop for a lender, ask about how long they've been in business. What is their company known for? What programs are they known for? How long they've been in business? I don't know if you know this, but it's pretty easy to get your loan officer's license. Many loan officers are great at taking an application, but when push comes to shove, when things get complicated, right? And there's a little nitty gritty knowledge and having to fight to get a loan closed. Does that loan officer know how to make that happen? What percentage of contracts make it to closing? What's their ratio on that? Do loans fall out during the third-party financing condition period? Sometimes there's a lot of lenders who only will take the application, throw out a pre-qualification versus pre-approval. We'll dive deeper into that. And it really costs the agents money. So we really recommend you get pre-approved. Some banks will say they only do pre-qualifications. A pre-qual, it doesn't carry as much weight. Most sellers are not going to want to accept an offer on a pre-qualification. So when that has become the case, I will push to have that bank, if they are the only place that has that program that buyer needs, that buyer and the agent both need to push that buyer goes through the entire underwriting process. And the reason we want to do this is because if you get under contract, you're writing earnest money check, option money check, inspections, appraisals, surveys, credit. You can lose 5 figures before you even get to the closing tables. It's just a lot of money to put at risk because the lender doesn't want to do all that work up front. So let's dive deeper into that. First, you're going to fill out a loan application, kind of get a pre-qual. You're going to talk with their lender. They're going to say, okay, this kind of makes sense. And you're going to then submit your W-2s for the last 2 years. If you're self-employed, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to do bank statements. And then they're going to submit it to what they call the processor and the underwriter, who's going to actually go through that whole file and find any red flags. Did you know that there's fraud out there and spam out there and people are putting things on people's credit and they don't even know about it? It gives you time to clean that up. You don't want to go under contract and then try to hastily figure it out. Do you have your divorce papers? All those things. All that's going to be done ahead of time. Is it a pain in the katush? Yes. Is it worth it? Abso-freaking-lutely. Okay. Now, here's some lenders that we've worked for in the past. Luis Rios with Success Lending. We've been working with him for, golly, almost 20 years. Okay. Brett Carmen, we've known. He's with First Community Mortgage. Alan Lester is with Town Square. Luis Rios with Success Lending. If you talk to them, you'll know that they all have different personalities, different programs, and different niches. Okay. There's things that Success Lending and Luis can do that the others cannot do. You can also find out how much experience they have. They have different niches. Luis can figure out ridiculous, if you think you might have like any obstacles, Luis usually can figure out a way to work it out. Okay. So go ahead, visit with us. Let's learn what your situation is, and we can actually match you probably with the best lender for you. Next, after you've been pre-approved, we're going to ask you a series of questions, okay, to get a better understanding and better clarity of what you're looking for in your next home. And you can also window shop on our website at homestarsellers.com, or just pretty much anywhere you find a home, we can definitely help you with that.